In the sun-scorched delta of Egypt's northern coast, where the Mediterranean kisses the desert, a vision was born. Not a vision of conquest, nor of gold, but of something rarer, a universal mind. Alexandria, founded in 331 BCE by Alexander the Great, was to be more than just another Greek colony. It was to be the beating heart of knowledge itself. Alexander would not live to see the city bear his name, become the intellectual capital of the ancient world. After his death, his general Ptolemy the Soter took control of Egypt, and with it, the dream of Alexandria. It was under his rule that the city began to take form, not just as a political center, but as a philosophical sanctuary. The Library of Alexandria was conceived as part of a larger complex known as the Mausoleum, a temple dedicated to the Muses, goddesses of the arts and sciences. But this was no mere repository of books. It was a living organism, pulsing with intellectual energy. Scholars lived on site. They ate together, studied together, debated endlessly. It was the world's first think tank. The Ptolemies had a singular goal: to collect every piece of knowledge in the known world. Scrolls were purchased, copied, translated, and stored. Ships docking in Alexandria were required to surrender any scrolls aboard so they could be copied for the library before being returned. The hunger for knowledge was obsessive, bordering on imperial. Some estimates claim the library housed over 400,000 scrolls. Others say it may have been as many as 700,000. We may never know the exact number, but this much is clear. It was the largest collection of human thought ever assembled in antiquity. Among those thoughts were the minds of Aristotle, Plato, Homer, and Heraclitus. Texts from India, Persia, Mesopotamia, and Egypt were translated into Greek. The library was a melting pot not just of cultures, but of consciousness. It preserved the best of what had been thought and known, and opened the door for what might come next. Here, for the first time, humanity began to think of itself as a global intelligence, not a splintered collection of tribes. Here, the Logos, reason, reigned, and here it would one day burn. But before the fire, there was light, the light of minds like Euclid, who formalized geometry within these walls, of Eratosthenes, who calculated the circumference of the earth to near-perfect accuracy more than 2,000 years ago, of Herophilos, who dissected human cadavers and laid the foundation for neuroscience, of Hypatia, who would come to symbolize not just intellect, but martyrdom for the cause of truth. This wasn't just a place for scholars. It was a temple of the human spirit, a fragile, shimmering miracle, one that would prove far too delicate for the forces to come. Because knowledge, once gathered, becomes dangerous. It questions empires, it mocks dogma, it threatens those who build their thrones on ignorance. And eventually, it becomes a target. The Library of Alexandria was more than a collection of scrolls. It was the epicenter of human consciousness, a cathedral to inquiry, standing quietly amid the chaos of a changing world. But ideas, even divine ones, do not live in isolation. They swim in the tides of history. And the library sat on a fault line. Egypt, though ancient and proud, had been subsumed by the Greeks. Then came the Romans. And with each regime change, the soul of Alexandria trembled. The Ptolemies, who had nurtured the library's birth, eventually lost power. The Greek-speaking elite held on to influence for centuries, but Rome's shadow grew long. By the time Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE, the city was no longer the dream it had once been. It was a chessboard in the game of empire. Caesar's arrival was not scholarly. It was strategic. He had pursued his rival Pompey across the Mediterranean and found himself caught in Egypt's own civil war between Cleopatra VII and her brother Ptolemy III. Caesar sided with Cleopatra, and Alexandria burned. Was it during this conflict that the library caught fire? Ancient accounts tell us that Caesar, cornered by the Egyptian navy, ordered his men to burn the fleet in Alexandria's harbor. The fire spread uncontrollably. Plutarch, writing a century later, claimed that the flames spread to the great library and destroyed it. But was it the library itself, or just a warehouse of scrolls near the docks? Historians have debated this for centuries. Some say Caesar's fire was the first blow. Others argue it was merely one wound in a long, slow death. Perhaps the library did not perish in a single dramatic blaze. Perhaps it bled out, gradually, painfully, over the course of 500 years. After all, what truly kills knowledge? It isn't always fire. Sometimes it's neglect. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's a change in values. The next great blow would come from within, not from foreign generals, but from the changing soul of the city itself. As Rome adopted Christianity as its official religion in the 4th century CE, the philosophical culture of Alexandria, steeped in Greek rationalism, pagan science, and pluralism, found itself under siege. To the rising tide of Christian orthodoxy, many of the ideas preserved in the library were not just outdated, they were heretical, dangerous, sorcery disguised as science. The very impulse that had built the library, the impulse to preserve and compare all systems of thought, was now viewed as a threat to divine truth. And the woman who embodied that impulse more than any other was Hypatia. She was a scholar, a teacher, a philosopher, a mathematician, a symbol. Born in Alexandria in the late 4th century, Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a prominent mathematician and astronomer. But she soon eclipsed her father, both intellectually and in influence. She taught openly, something almost unthinkable for a woman at the time. Her lectures attracted students from across the Roman Empire. She taught Plato, Aristotle, and Plotinus. She mapped the stars. She designed instruments. And she stood as a living rebuke to the idea that knowledge belonged only to the priesthood or the patriarchy. To some, she was a hero. To others, a heretic. In 415 CE, a violent mob, incited by rising tensions between the Christian bishop Cyril and the Roman governor Orestes, dragged Hypatia from her chariot, stripped her, flayed her skin with pottery shards, and burned her remains. A philosopher killed in the streets of the very city that once celebrated the intellect above all else. Her death didn't just mark the end of a life, it marked the murder of a culture. If the library had not yet fallen, this was surely the moment it lost its soul. In the aftermath, the great intellectual engines of Alexandria slowed. Scrolls were no longer copied. Scholars fled. The Mausoleum crumbled. But there is one final tale, perhaps apocryphal, perhaps true, that deserves mention. In 642 CE, the Arab general Amr ibn al-As captured Alexandria during the Muslim conquest of Egypt. According to a later disputed account, the Caliph Umar was asked what to do with the vast library of scrolls. He is said to have replied, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heretical. Destroy them." Whether this event happened is unclear. Most modern historians doubt it. The story first appears centuries later and may reflect Christian anxieties more than Islamic policy. But true or not, the story endures. For a reason. Because the real tragedy of the Library of Alexandria is not just that it was burned. It's that it was vulnerable to burning at all. It wasn't protected. It wasn't passed on. It wasn't sacred enough to survive the shifting tides of belief and empire. And that tells us something profound. Humanity is not guaranteed to preserve its wisdom. In fact, we often destroy it.